She was dying. I held her hand, trying to comfort her as she took her last breath. But then, her lips trembled, and she whispered something that shattered everything I believed in. "Tell James, he was the best I ever had." My husband's name. That moment didn't just haunt me. It changed the course of my entire life. If you've ever trusted someone with your whole heart, only to find out they had a whole other life behind your back, then this story will hit home. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me till the end. I've seen a lot of people die. It's part of the job when you're a hospice nurse. I've held the hands of strangers as they took their last breaths, whispered final prayers, and said goodbye to the world with trembling lips. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the night Margot passed. She was admitted under the name Margaret Elise Turner, no next of kin, late-stage pancreatic cancer. Her chart said she was unresponsive for most of the day, barely conscious, and hadn't spoken in over 48 hours. It was just past midnight. The halls were quiet, the kind of eerie stillness that creeps into your bones. I was doing my rounds, checking vitals, straightening linens, offering whatever comfort I could. When I reached room 208, the lights were low. Margot's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. I gently touched her wrist to check her pulse, and then, suddenly, her eyes flicked open. "Hey there," I said softly, trying not to startle her. "You're okay. I'm here." She blinked a few times. Her gaze was unfocused, but there was something there, recognition almost. Her lips parted like she was trying to say something, so I leaned in closer. Her voice was barely a whisper, more breath than sound. I had to strain to hear her. "Tell James." I froze. "Tell James. He was the best I ever had." She smiled, a slow, almost mischievous smile. Then her body relaxed, her eyes closed again, and she was gone. I just sat there, stunned, unsure if I'd heard right. I checked her pulse again. Nothing. Flatline. I should have called it in right away, but I couldn't move. My mind was spinning. James? There are a lot of men named James. It could have been a coincidence, just a name from her past. A high school sweetheart. A husband long gone. A ghost she saw in her final moments. But she'd said it so clearly, so deliberately. And the way she smiled, like it was a secret she'd been dying to tell someone. It didn't feel random at all. I didn't sleep that night. After the coroner came and took her body, I stayed behind and stared at the wall in the break room, nursing a cold cup of coffee. I tried to shake it off, tried to be rational, but deep down, something felt off. Because that name, James, it wasn't just common, it was my husband's name. James and I had been married for 12 years. We met at a bookshop in Portsmouth. He was browsing the mystery aisle. I was looking for a Jane Austen reread. He smiled, made a cheesy pun about Pride and Prejudice being the original enemies to lovers, and somehow I ended up agreeing to coffee. We were good together, at least that's what I thought. He was gentle, funny, the kind of man who'd warm up my car on snowy mornings and leave little notes on the bathroom mirror. We had Sunday rituals, croissants, black coffee, and the crossword. He'd always fill in the clues I couldn't get. To anyone looking in, we had it figured out. Solid marriage, no kids, but not by choice. We'd tried. After 2 miscarriages and a year of quiet heartbreak, we settled into the life we had. A small house, a cat named Hemingway, safe, calm, predictable love. And now, this. One sentence from a dying woman had cracked through that entire reality like a sledgehammer to glass. That night, after I got home, I stood in the kitchen for what felt like hours. James was asleep, oblivious, peaceful. I watched him breathe, watched his chest rise and fall like nothing had changed. I wanted to shake him awake and scream, "Who is Margot? What did you do?" But I didn't. I couldn't. What if I was wrong? What if that dying woman wasn't talking about my James? What if I said something and destroyed our marriage for no reason? I needed to know for sure. But here's the thing. Once a seed of doubt is planted, it grows in silence. And the worst part? James had never given me a reason not to trust him. That's what made it so unbearable. Because now, I started looking back on every business trip, every weekend he spent visiting his parents, every time he locked his phone when I walked into the room. Tiny things, harmless things, things I never questioned, until now. I felt like I was unraveling from the inside. My chest was tight, my thoughts spinning. Every time he touched me, I flinched a little. Every "I love you" sounded more like a question than a promise. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not my best friend. I was ashamed. Ashamed that one whisper from a dying woman could make me question everything I'd built for over a decade. But something inside me had shifted. A door had opened, and there was no closing it again. The morning after Margot died, James was already dressed when I came downstairs. He handed me a cup of coffee, kissed my forehead, and said, "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep." I wanted to scream, "Of course I didn't sleep. A woman just died saying your name." But instead, I smiled weakly and nodded. That became the theme for the next few days. Pretend, smile, observe. I started noticing things I hadn't before. James's phone, for one. He used to leave it lying around the house, kitchen counter, nightstand, bathroom sink. But now, it was always in his pocket, always face down, and he had started using Face ID, which we'd both agreed was silly and unnecessary. Then there was the laundry. I was folding clothes when I found a small hotel receipt in the pocket of his jeans. A boutique hotel in Rockport, dated just 2 weeks ago. I stared at it for a full minute, trying to remember if he'd mentioned any trip. He hadn't. When I asked where he was that weekend, he'd said, "Visiting Mom. Her hip's been acting up again." But his mom had called me the day after that weekend, just to chat. She didn't mention anything about a visit. When I casually brought it up, she said, "Oh, I wish James could have come. We haven't seen him in weeks." That hit me like a punch to the stomach. I tucked the receipt into a book on the shelf. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Then there was the way he reacted when I mentioned Margot. I told him, vaguely, that one of my patients had passed away under strange circumstances, that she had spoken just before she died. His face stiffened, barely perceptible, but enough. He didn't ask what she said, didn't even pretend to be curious. He just nodded and said, "I'm sorry, Em. That must have been hard." And then he changed the subject. James never passed up a chance to be my emotional rock, but this time, it felt like he couldn't get away fast enough. It wasn't proof, but it was something. Little cracks in the perfect picture. And the more I looked, the more I started to see. I started living two lives. By day, I was Nurse Emily, calm, composed, compassionate, smiling at families, charting medications, holding trembling hands. I delivered comfort to strangers while my own soul was unraveling. By night, I was something else entirely. Restless, suspicious, obsessed. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed beside James, staring at the ceiling, wondering who he really was. He'd drift off quickly, like nothing was wrong, like he wasn't the ghost in my thoughts, the reason my stomach clenched every time his phone vibrated. I started watching him, closely. The way he answered calls and always walked out of the room. The way his tone changed when he said, "I love you," like the words were part of a script he didn't believe anymore. He stopped initiating affection. No more forehead kisses, no more lazy weekend cuddles. When I touched him, he stiffened, just for a second, but enough for me to feel it. Like my love repelled him now. And it wasn't just the physical distance. It was the emotional gap. I asked him one night if he still felt happy with me. He paused, too long, and said, "Of course I do." But his eyes didn't match the words. That moment broke something in me. I started questioning everything. Was our whole marriage a lie? Was he ever really mine? Or had I just been a placeholder while he lived a second life somewhere else? I found myself crying in the shower, gripping the tiles like they were the only things holding me upright. My friends noticed. My supervisor pulled me aside and asked if I needed time off. I lied and said I was fine. Because how do you explain this kind of pain? This wasn't grief. It was betrayal you couldn't prove yet. It was knowing something was rotten beneath the surface, but having no shovel to dig it up. I began rereading old texts between us, looking for inconsistencies, watching our wedding video, and wondering if he was already lying back then. I spiraled, deep, fast. One night, I found myself parked outside his office building at 2 a.m., hoping to catch something, anything, but there was nothing there. Just my own reflection in the windshield, hollow-eyed and trembling. That scared me. I was losing myself in this, drowning in questions I couldn't answer. And still, I said nothing to James, because I knew, in my gut, that once I asked the question, everything would change forever. The turning point came one Thursday evening, a week after Margot's death. James had left his phone on the charger in the bathroom, something he hadn't done in weeks. He was out back watering the garden, humming to himself like nothing in the world was wrong. I stared at that phone like it was a bomb. Part of me wanted to walk away, to cling to my last shred of dignity, but another part, the part that refused to be lied to, reached for it. The passcode hadn't changed. My fingers moved on muscle memory. I didn't even know what I was looking for, until I found it. A voicemail from a number labeled Margot, time-stamped from 3 months ago. I pressed play. Her voice was soft, almost flirtatious. "Hey, just confirming our room for Saturday. Same place as last time. And bring that wine I liked. You know, the one you said reminds you of me." I dropped the phone. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were caving in and the air had been sucked from the house. James came inside moments later, smiling. "Want to order Thai tonight?" I nodded. Somehow, I nodded. Because now I knew. It was real. Margot wasn't some random patient who happened to whisper his name. She knew him, intimately. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I spent the next several days going deeper. I searched our shared laptop. The browser history had been wiped, but the synced bookmarks told their own story. Rockport Inn, Florence House boutique retreat, private voicemail to email services. I even found a folder buried deep in the downloads. Inside, screenshots of flight itineraries. James had been flying to places he never told me about, and every trip coincided with a weekend I'd been scheduled on a double shift. It was like watching a puzzle fall into place, except this puzzle was a portrait of betrayal. I reached out to the retirement center where Margot had volunteered for years. I told them I was writing a remembrance piece for a hospice journal, not a total lie, and asked for any footage or photos they had of her. They sent me a link to a shared drive. In one of the videos, a charity event last summer, I saw her standing beside James, laughing, clinking glasses. His hand was on the small of her back like it belonged there. She looked younger, healthier, glowing, and he looked happy, too happy. I stared at the video over and over, memorizing the way they looked at each other. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't a mistake. It was something else entirely. They had history, routine, intimacy. I sat in the dark that night, watching that video on a loop, letting the truth sink in. He hadn't just cheated on me. He loved her. And now she was dead. Once I knew what to look for, everything started pouring in like floodwater through a cracked dam. James was smart, but not careful. His arrogance had made him sloppy. I began checking our credit card statements, something I'd barely looked at before. That's when I found more. A candlelit dinner in Boston on a weekend he said he was at his parents' cabin. A spa charge for two, from a boutique resort in Maine. Uber receipts from neighborhoods he never told me he'd visited, all dated within the past year. I took screenshots of everything. I printed copies. I started a file, not on the laptop, but in a locked drawer in my home office. A folder labeled Patient Follow-Up, just in case he ever found it. Then came the locket. I returned to the hospice center a week later, under the pretense of gathering personal effects for documentation. Margot's things had been collected and stored in a small box. Inside was a leather-bound journal, a scarf, a cheap gold bracelet, and a delicate silver locket I hadn't noticed before. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than it should. I pried it open. On one side, a tiny black and white photo of a much younger Margot, and on the other, a more recent picture of her standing beside a man. The man was James. His arm was around her shoulder, and he was kissing the top of her head. My breath caught. This wasn't casual. This wasn't distant. This wasn't over. I flipped through her journal. Most of it was fragmented thoughts, reflections on pain, fear, and dying. But one passage, dated just 3 months ago, chilled me. He says he can't leave her. Not yet. But he loves me. He always has. He says I'm the only one who ever really saw him. I believe him. I have to. I reread that page 10 times. I don't know what shocked me more, that he was still seeing her while I was making him dinner and folding his laundry, or that he told her the same lies he used to tell me. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was an entire second life, and she died believing in it. I found more voicemails. Some were playful, others intimate. One stood out. It was dated just 10 days before she passed. I know you're scared. I am too. But I don't regret anything, James. Not 1 second. Tell Emily whatever you need to. I hope someday she understands. I wanted to scream, break something, burn it all. But instead, I listened to it again, because somewhere in that message was the truth I needed. I was done doubting. I was done hurting in silence. He thought she died with his secret. He had no idea. I was just getting started. And if you think that was shocking, wait until you see what I did next. Stay with me, because the revenge? It was carefully planned, and brutal in the most beautiful way. There's a strange calm that settles in when the grief burns out. It's like a cold clarity, sharp, focused, dangerous. I stopped crying, stopped questioning, stopped waiting for him to admit anything, because now I didn't need a confession. I had proof, and more importantly, I had purpose. The Emily he married was gone. What remained was someone he didn't know how to lie to anymore. I didn't let him see the shift, though. I still kissed him good morning, still made his coffee just the way he liked it, still listened to his stories about work with nods and fake smiles. If anything, I became more attentive, because I needed him to stay comfortable. I needed him not to see what was coming. While he snored beside me at night, I planned. I created backups of every file, every voicemail, every receipt, every journal page from Margot's things. I scanned the photo from the locket, uploaded it to a private drive, then printed a copy and tucked it into my anniversary album, right next to a photo of James and me cutting our wedding cake. I went back to the retirement center under the pretense of donating books. But really, I met with the building manager, a kind woman named Cheryl who remembered Margot well. I asked her if she had any records of volunteer sign-ins, security footage, anything at all. She hesitated. "Why are you asking?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Because the man in this photo—" I slid her the picture of James and Margot from the charity event, "is my husband." Her face paled. Without another word, she led me to the office and pulled up the building's archives. There they were, James and Margot, dozens of times. Sometimes he signed in under his own name. Other times he just visited casually. One video showed him kissing her in the hallway near the therapy room. I asked for a copy. Cheryl handed me a USB drive and said, "Whatever this is, I hope you get peace from it." Peace wasn't what I was after. That week, I also reached out to an old nursing school friend who now worked as a grief counselor. I told her I was putting together a case study on complex relationships and end-of-life care, something I might write a book about. That part wasn't even a lie. She helped me interpret parts of Margot's journal from a psychological lens, confirming what I already suspected. Margot had been emotionally dependent on James. He'd made her feel like she was the love of his life, even as he tucked himself into my bed at night. He didn't just cheat. He manipulated a dying woman's heart and used mine to cover his tracks. That made it unforgivable. I marked our wedding anniversary on the calendar, just 2 weeks away. He had no idea I knew. He was planning a getaway weekend, probably to distract me. But I had other plans. I called the restaurant he reserved and had them upgrade the reservation to a private room, told them I was surprising my husband and needed room for a few friends. They asked how many guests. I said, just enough to change his life forever. Our anniversary arrived on a Saturday. He brought me flowers, white lilies, my favorite. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "You look beautiful." I smiled. You have no idea how much that means to me today. He didn't know that beneath my dress was a phone set to record. In my purse, a folder full of printed evidence. And inside the private dining room of the upscale restaurant he thought he'd chosen, our story was about to change. When we arrived, he looked confused. The hostess led us not to a table for 2, but a room with a long table set for 10. "Wait, what is this?" he whispered. I leaned in and said, "A night to remember." Then the doors opened. My best friend Rachel walked in, then my brother, 2 of his old college friends, his parents. James froze. "What's going on?" I stood, raised my glass. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It means so much to have the people who love James here, as we celebrate not just our anniversary, but everything he's been keeping from us." He blinked. "Emily, what?" I interrupted. "You once told me honesty is the foundation of love. I believed you, so I'd like to return the favor and share a few honest truths." I turned to his parents first. "Did you know that when James said he was visiting you last fall, he was actually in Boston with a woman named Margot? She died last month. I was there when she took her last breath." Gasps around the room. James's face drained of color. "Emily, stop! This isn't—" I pulled the locket from my purse and placed it on the table. "This was around her neck. Want to open it, James? Or should I tell them what's inside?" He didn't move. "Fine," I said. I flipped it open and held it up. One side, Margot, the woman he loved. The other, James, the man she believed would leave his wife for her. His mother covered her mouth. His father stood up, furious. I didn't stop. I placed the printed journal pages down. She wrote about him, how he made promises, how he said he couldn't leave me, yet, how she believed in their love until the very end. I opened my phone and hit play on the voicemail. Margot's voice filled the room. "I know you're scared. I am too. But I don't regret anything, James." He lunged toward me to grab the phone. "Turn it off." But Rachel blocked him. I stood taller. "Don't worry, James. There's more. Video footage, sign-in records, Uber trips, charges you thought I'd never question." He looked around, at his friends, his family, their eyes filled with confusion, betrayal, disbelief. His father spoke first. "Is this true?" James tried to speak, but no words came out, just silence. And in that silence, I felt peace for the first time in weeks. Not because I'd humiliated him, but because I wasn't hiding anymore. because he no longer controlled the narrative. After a long pause, James finally said, "I made a mistake." I laughed. "No, James. A mistake is forgetting a date. You lived a lie. In my home, in my bed, in front of everyone who trusted you." I turned to his parents. "I'm filing for divorce, but I wanted you to hear the truth before he came crawling with excuses." His mother nodded, eyes brimming with tears. And then, I walked out. Not broken, not angry, just free. After that night, James tried to control the damage. He sent flowers, emails, voicemails, some begging, some angry, all useless. I didn't respond to a single one. He even showed up at my work one afternoon. Security escorted him out before he made it past the lobby. I didn't need drama. I needed distance. The fallout came fast. His friends stopped returning his texts. His parents, especially his mother, went silent. I heard from Rachel that his father called the whole thing an embarrassment to the family and told James to man up and face what he did. He moved in with a coworker, apparently, someone he used to complain about over dinner. How poetic. But I didn't track his every move anymore, because something unexpected had started happening. I began to breathe again. It wasn't immediate. Some mornings, I still woke up and reached for the other side of the bed before remembering it was mine again. Other days, I stared at my reflection, wondering how I could have missed it all. But there was something powerful in the silence. And in that silence, I started writing. It began with scattered journal entries, half thoughts, flashes of memory, bits of Margot's words that wouldn't leave my mind. Then it turned into something bigger. A book. At first, I didn't even plan to publish it. I just wanted to make sense of what happened. To her, to me, to him. But the more I wrote, the more I realized this wasn't just about James. This was about the stories we believe, the ones we're told, and the ones we tell ourselves to survive. The working title? She Died with My Husband's Name. I wrote late at night, fueled by coffee and clarity. I traced the timeline. I laid out the evidence. I relived every voicemail, every journal page, every moment I looked at James and didn't know the truth. And slowly, sentence by sentence, I took my power back. My editor loved it. A publisher picked it up fast. Apparently, betrayal sells. But more than that, truth resonates. The book hit the New York Times bestseller list within a month. I did interviews, podcasts, book clubs. I sat on stages and read the very words that once broke me. And every time I did, another piece of me came back stronger. People reached out, thousands of them, thanking me for telling the story they were too afraid to speak. Not all were about cheating. Some were about loss, lies, family secrets, even deathbed confessions. I realized something. What happened to me wasn't rare. But talking about it out loud, that was rare. And that was power. James sent me a signed copy request. I declined. I mailed him a blank notebook instead. No note, no explanation. Let him write his own ending, since he tried so hard to rewrite mine. There's a strange kind of silence that follows the storm. Not emptiness, not numbness, just quiet. It's the sound of clarity, when all the noise finally stops. That's what it felt like once the dust settled. Not victory, not revenge, just truth. And truth doesn't always feel good, but it's always clean. People kept asking me, "Do you miss him?" Here's what I told them. I don't miss James. I miss who I thought he was. But that man never existed. He was a story I wrote in my head, a fiction, a fantasy. And when that story collapsed, I didn't lose a husband. I lost an illusion. What I gained was me. The version of me who doesn't second-guess instincts, who doesn't confuse silence for peace, who doesn't carry someone else's guilt like it's hers to bear. I started saying no more often, to things that drained me, to people who only wanted parts of me. I started saying yes, to long walks with no destination, to messy healing, to creating instead of clinging. I started living for the woman who once sat in the dark, listening to a voicemail from a dead woman, wondering if she was the fool. She wasn't. She was the fire, and it just hadn't lit yet. I look back now and realize Margot's last words weren't just a confession, they were a key. Tell James, he was the best I ever had. It sounds like flattery, but it was actually a mirror, because in that moment, she gave me the one thing he never could, the truth. Ugly, unfiltered, but honest. And from that honesty, I rebuilt everything. Not just my story, but my standards, my spine, my sense of self. James still lives in the same city. I pass him sometimes. He looks smaller now, not physically, but spiritually. When lies are stripped away, some people don't know how to carry their own weight. I don't smile. I don't wave. I just keep walking, because I no longer walk with ghosts, only with fire.